Good morning. So this week I got my hands slapped, or I was slapped around a bit by one of my coworkers, because apparently for the last 5 Morapies I failed to introduce myself. I always thought that this was enough, the bumper, but apparently it isn't. So I decided that I'll change my opening. I had another one, cool one planned, but I'll change it and I'll introduce myself properly. It also means that if I go over my time, I have something to slap that person around with as well, because it's their fault. Anyway, so my name is Vriend. I've been with AMS-IX for 10 years, had multiple roles within the technical team, and currently I hold the position of the Continuous Improvement Specialist. Now, and over the last 8 Morapies, I had the pleasure to update you on some of the cool projects we're running within our operations department. And this year is no different. I'll be taking you through the journey we had so far while migrating our Amsterdam platform, or the switches in our Amsterdam platform for the Junipers. Now, given my new role, I'll be focusing a bit more on the improvements, or actually I'll be focusing a lot more on the improvements we made to speed things along and make our lives a bit easier. Now, for those that are here for every year, basically, you might remember 2 years ago, I gave a first draft planning on this project, and I mentioned that we would start later in that year, December of 2022, with the first migration, or at least that was the expectation, and that the full project would last around 4.5 years. Now, of course, this was a bit of a safe planning, given the fact we just came out of a global pandemic and we weren't really sure what kind of surprises that thing still had to throw at us. But also we had global delivery issues with chip shortages and something with a boat being parked wrong in the Panama Canal. In short, we did get some delays from those deliveries, luckily not from the pandemic. But we also got some delays due to underestimating the amount of time it would take us to integrate these Junipers into our tools, automation, monitoring, and that kind of stuff. And it actually delayed us so much that last year I was standing here together with my coworker Mohamed, and we couldn't update you whatsoever because we didn't do any migrations yet. Now, while we were waiting for the integration work to be finalized, we decided to already put together the core migration team and start with some initial improvements just to speed things up, and in the hope that we could make up for the delay we suffered. And we created a couple of initial improvements, mostly aimed at creating some standardized documentation, templates to guide us through these migrations, and to help us simplify the preparations we need to do for each of them. And also some first automation, so things like port configurations, just the basics. When these Junipers get delivered, that we can right away put the base configuration on them and put them in the field. Those kind of little things we started with. Now, and after we did the first migration, just after last year's Morapie, we found that these improvements that we made actually speeded things up with around 6 to 7 months. Basically making up for the delay we suffered so far, which was exactly the goal, and still making us end around the same time. Now, of course, we like these improvements, so we kept on doing them. So we did another one, basically. And after this first migration, I asked each of the involved engineers individually on what else we could improve. And funny enough, only a handful of items were mentioned, and nothing that would really speed things up a lot. Tiny bits, but nothing big. So that made me think, everybody here has contact with technical people, and we all know that engineers, or nerds if you want to call them like that, they're a very proud bunch of people. And they will do everything in their power to show you or me or other people how experienced and knowledgeable they are, especially towards other engineers. So what would happen if you take a couple of your Uber engineers, which were luckily also involved in this migration, and you lock them up in a room for a couple of hours and tell them they have one goal, and that is to come up with improvements? I figured that would spark everything up, and in all honesty, I locked them up, and the first hour, nice discussion started, some nice improvements were mentioned, we got this nice list, but again, nothing big. So I decided, let's throw some wood on this fire, and maybe spark that pride of theirs a bit. So I promised them that if they can come up with any improvement or a set of improvements that would speed the migration up with at least 6 months, I would take them out for a nice luxury lunch. And to really tickle that pride, I promised them that whoever gives me the best improvement, that person can choose where we're going to go for lunch and how many beers we will have with that lunch. And of course, this did spark them. They right away went into overdrive, and this list started growing and growing, and one engineer would throw in an improvement just to hear another engineer improve that improvement. And in the end, after a couple of hours, I decided to shut it down because we got this huge list of improvements to go through. And basically, the migration team was just the 5 people in that room who were also at that moment still involved in other projects. So we only had a limited amount of time. Now, for that reason, we did an impact effort analysis. We created a priority based on that. And out of that came a top 5 of improvements we chose to use or to put in motion. And during the next 2 migrations, we actually put them to the test. We tried them out and updated the planning, and we found that especially 2 of these improvements, they were the big contributor to speeding up the planning. The first one was something from our installation engineers, the physical guys. It's something that we call the physical port mapping, basically a list of how everything needs to be connected from port to port, which customer goes there, port speeds, optic types, those kind of things. Now, this was a task that we used to do. It used to take us around a week to complete with all the little details that are attached to it. But by automating this, we were able to narrow it down to a single morning and speeding things along a lot. The second one was, again, the automation of configuration items, where the NOC created an automation for mass customer port configurations. So now all of a sudden they could just run one configuration or one command and all these configurations would be done, or at least the majority of them. And this speeded things a lot. This speeded up things a lot, of course, especially during the most critical part of the migrations. On top of that, both of them also had the side effect of gathering a lot more reliable data. So all the output that it gave was a lot more reliable compared to manual work, manual typing, and less prone to human error. Now, after those 2 migrations that I said, where we tested them, we updated the planning again, and we actually found that these new improvements sped things up. They made us about 1 year faster than the original planning. So those 6 months were made, and we had a nice lunch. I don't have pictures. I'm sorry, we didn't take them, probably because of the beers that were attached to it. But yeah, we had a nice lunch because it was more than 6 months. Now, of course, we wanted more of these improvements. We wanted to see how far we can take this. So we decided to do these little improvement sessions after each and every single migration, just to check again, can we do more? Can we do more? But at the same time, we also realized that now these boxes are starting to go into production. We also need to support our operations coworkers, so we decided that a part of our time would also end up in fixing the automation we already created, so fixing the bugs, making the automation more flexible so they can handle single port configurations or the exceptions we still have from the old days, just to help them also to operate these machines. But since we still had 26 switches to migrate, speed was still important as well. So yeah, more than 50% of our focus went there as well. And over the months that followed, we did a couple more migrations, and every migration was closed down with one of these improvement sessions or retrospectives. And every time, again, we updated the planning, we saw that it speeded up. Up until December of last year, December of 2023, when for the first time, after updating the planning, we saw a possible finishing date of end of this year, 2024. 2.5 years faster than originally planned, or sooner than originally planned, while also making up for a 7-month delay. Now, if I look at the improvements from an implementation standpoint, so speeding up, I don't think there's much to speed up anymore at this point. I think we really did our best already, and the result, you can see it, it's insane. For them. Thank you. Yeah, so like I said, it's insane, and there's not much to speed up anymore. And what makes this more, how do you say it? What makes me more proud of them is actually that they did these improvements while also performing multiple of the most complicated migrations in the history of AMS-IX and handling a severe outage back in November. So kudos for that, but the applause you got already. So you were a bit too early on that part. But yeah, there's a lot more I want to say about this project. I really would love to talk more about this project, and I'm sure my team wants to as well, but we're a bit on a time schedule today. So this was it for me today. Thank you very much.